a bloody pogrom of unimaginable proportions would have occurred in those countries. And in Germany, fortunately, everything gruesome has so far been confined to official authorities. And there is a grain of truth in what the German Aryan industrial magnate said to me half a year ago, that at the present moment only the Germans treat the Jews with pity and respect. Just to warn you, I don't believe this. But I mean, it goes in some direction, you know, but he's kind of stressing the state unleashing of this anti-Semitism. And then we had kind of resentments in East Europe as well, right? And then he said, however, I would write him, his friend, who says, apart from the German professors who are humiliating themselves in our days, this generation of professors will be assigned the saddest place in the history of these days, which will one day be written by avenging communists. I mean, it's, by all principles, it's an interesting quote, I believe. And also, he said something about anti-Semitism in Italy being unleashed by the law in 1938, because then the professors also, all these kinds of demonstrations began and all these things, while you have much lesser traces of this before. Then in Germany also. So it's kind of interpretation of this. So we had, of course, much bigger numbers and visibility of Jews in the German public life before. This kind of, and then you have the scapegoat thing after World War I, right? That they tried to find some explanation who was responsible for the defeat. And of course, this kind of anti-Semitism, the way he didn't have in Italy, because he won the war. So I warned Erika also that it might be too long of a talk, but I'll try my best. So Erika, which I quote as one main source, at least for the immigration part, says this about Pano, who was here in Turin, right? Yeah. And he went to Switzerland and insisting, because he found it unlikely that Switzerland would attack Italy. So he was still so anxious. So he wouldn't spend a thought of going to America, because it would be kind of. And then you have Richard Vermees, whom I'm working on. He's Austrian, actually, originally. He says after the war, he's skeptical about international collaboration because of the loss, for instance, of Tyrol or southern Tyrol to Italy. But he was Austrian, right? And so he says to Corman, it's about the conference in Innsbruck, it's not even in Italy, it's in northern Tyrol, right? But he still feels him so close. You will not be surprised by the fact that I will not come to the conference, since my views about Tyrol and the Italian are well known to me. Furthermore, I'm a bit surprised at seeing that German professors feel the need to communicate their theoretical researches on flight to foreigners on the conference, while we are at the same time prevented from building real airplanes. Also, you have the Elvis kind of forbade Germans to build airplanes in the 1920s, and they had also restricted the army. So you feel this nationalism in him. He was at the time in Berlin, so he adapted also kind of the German position. So So then we have this interesting book by Livia and Osama on the foundation of the UMI. Was not created in response to bottom-up requests. So it seems like a kind of interesting kind of internationalism because it's all kind of restricted to the allies, and so UME was kind of created as a consequence of the victory and as a part of the International Research Council, which was kind of dominated by the West. And this was kind of supported by the Terror. And he installed Pinkerler as the boss to the UME. As you know, Pinkerler was Jewish, but at the time, I mean, it was probably not a topic. And then people who were more internationalists in a broader sense, but in the restricted internationalism of the West, like Castelnuovo, Enriquez, Levi-Civita, and Sebel, they were kind of skeptical, beginning, as we learn from Livia and Osama. I think Osama is also among the listeners today, right? Probably I missed one. So then we have this manifesto by Gentile. And only two mathematicians signed it, namely Pinkerler and Gini, or if you can call him a mathematician between statistics and eugenics and nationalism. So Adler and others have argued that there was something constructive also about fascism in mathematics side and building these institutes, and the connections were closer. I mean, we argue anyway that science and mathematics is something humane and not compatible with a dictatorial state, right? I mean, this is anyway naive. So Gini is a fascinating person. We have these books by Casada and Renault. There was. So about his institute. So he was skeptical about the German Nazi opinion of genetics, and also because he had a different position in the eugenics movement, and he didn't believe. No, he was not strictly opposed to mixing of races, whatever races meant. That's why he had slight, although he was closely collaborating with Mussolini, and even wrote kind of speeches for him later on, right? He was opposed in a way, skeptical about the racial or racist laws because they apparently obviously kind of interfered with mixing of races. Or plainly said, I mean, forbade the kind of allegedly Jewish to marry with non-Jews. Yeah, so we can. He was, of course, a racist by all terms, in our mind. especially at the time when it was against so-called Negroes. But I mean, this was common in the US too, so you can adjust it by our standards, right? So I said this already. Yeah? Okay. Sorry about this. So he had also kind of critical relationship to mathematical statistics. So that's difficult to kind of consider him as a pure mathematician in the sense, but Richard Prometheus, whom we mentioned before, he studied after the war with him in Rome, I think it was. And he was kind of, he said, I have only this from a letter, you know. I know particularly of the same opinion with respect to the modern American way of statistics. I don't think he alludes here to eugenicism or whatever. He alludes to the modern kind of measure theoretic kind of founding of statistics in the US too. And we have there's a special kind of Italian statistical methodology which we inquire closer. I think in the sense of Gini, and this is kind of accepted by theoretical statisticians like Yule and Kendall, and to take it independent. So he has to be considered in a way as a mathematician too. So, and of course, I alluded already to this general internationalism by Castelnuovo and especially, well, in the beginning also Severi, but he, of course, changed his mind, and Levi Civita. And then we can ask about the relationship of the Italians to the Rockefeller Foundation, because the Rockefeller Foundation, which I wrote a bit on it, supported the International Affairs of Mathematics. And so, I mean, this Wycliffe Rose, founder of the International Education Board, said this when he traveled Europe in 1922. And this was written before the March of Rome, on April 9th. Bolshevism was for a time a very serious menace in Italy. It has gone. The workers who took possession of the factories found they could not operate them. So they were unable. This is a conservative kind of guy from the Rockefeller Foundation, right? The failure served as a demonstration. Russia has had its influence. The movement in Italy seems dead. So this is kind of a little bit background. They kind of would accept Mussolini much easier. Well, which is kind of obvious because he was not a communist, obviously, and so that they were kind of also open to collaborate with fascist Italy for grants, while the Russians didn't appear in the 20s with grants for the Rockefeller Foundation. This was kind of considered as, I mean, and this is ironic because the Russians were so strong, they're growing stronger and stronger in mathematics. So if you look at this, they find the grantees of Italian grantees. This was just two, basically. Seneca and Savitsky, if you call him Italian, so he's all Russian. But you have quite a few hosts for foreign fellows from the Rockefeller Foundation, right? And you see all the time Levi Civita is mentioned here. So he was the most active in all these in advising students coming to Rome. So it's really unbalanced. Lots of processes. So Rome has still, especially algebraic geometry, but also differential geometry, but almost no fellows. While the Germans had I think 20 fellows with order Asia at the time going to the US, right, and connecting to the West, learning English, which the Italians didn't have at the time. So this shows something of restricted internationality. So they had still to learn classical differential algebraic geometries from the Italians, which has also to do with this kind of alleged lack of rigor. So they had to kind of gain the tacit knowledge from the teachers in Rome. So Tarski went to the US, and of course he communicated much, but he couldn't do it alone of the Italian tradition. So Birkhoff was also traveling Europe. Birkhoff, leading American mathematician, and he had close contacts to Voltaire and to other Italians. Gave his talk in Bologna on aesthetics and mathematics were visible in Bologna 1928. And he's kind of, Trowbridge is another officer. He speaks about this deliberate policy of drawing to Rome younger men. So, in Paris, we had this kind of concentration, everything on France and Paris, which was kind of seen as problematic. While in Italy, there was too little of that in a way. So they thought they should more create a kind of centers in the opinion of the Rockefeller Foundation. It's a wise policy for the Italian scientists to take. This is our kind of internal documents from the Rockefeller archives, which actually also are not in my book, but I just got them out for the purpose of this talk here. So then we have this Congress, 1928. Lincoln was the president of ICM at the time, for the Congress which he organized, but he was also president of the IMU of the International Mathematical Union, of this kind of nationalist kind of, which excluded the Germans. Nationalist, Western nationalist, kind of restricted internationalism to the West. So then the Germans returned for the first time to the international scene on this Congress in 1928, led by Hilbert from Göttingen. So you have here the proceedings. Some people misread this to 6 years, Roman 6 as not only the Congress, but it's not the case with the 6 years of dictatorship, right? So it was kind of redated. And then we have this interesting thing with Hilbert wanting to give a talk. Sorry, I'm not getting any signs from that. Wanted to give a talk about mathematics international, and that mathematics knows no races, doesn't know no races. So anti-racist speech. And this was distributed by Constance Reed in her biography of Hilbert, and everybody copied it, but nobody gave a documentation that you actually held this talk. And I remember when we met in Mittag Left, I talked about this, right? And people were kind of incredulous, and they didn't like when I said that most likely Hilbert did not give this talk, because we don't have any documentation in any letters. I mean, this stuff diminished intention to speak about, to be anti-racist, right? Die Mathematik kennt keine Rassen. Doesn't know racism. That's his manuscript. But you probably didn't give us, or most likely 99%, because it's not in the proceedings, it's no letter, no report by the Congress. I mean, it's highly unlikely. So I published on this in Mathematical Intelligence. As Capisto Analisa asks, maybe it wasn't the right place anyway to speak about racism in fascism. Italy, but I mean, as I said, it's problematic as anti-Semitism anyway at the time, and the Congress was heavily subsidized by the fascist regime. And then I said, well, there was positive signs also for mathematics under Mussolini. Pinkola joined the fascist party. So this is in the proceedings here. It's not under distinguished patronage of King and the honorary presidency of His Excellency Benito Mussolini. So then the manuscript, it was. Well, the reason why he didn't give the talk was partly disease and partly it wasn't in good health, and partly because maybe he found it himself imbalanced. If you read this, where he praises all these mathematicians of the past, and he says these men are thrown wildly between the nations. But I mean, it's not wildly, I mean, it's just Germans and French. Right? I mean, it's no Italian at all, which is, of course, embarrassing. I mean, even if he doesn't, only wants to mention living persons. He could have mentioned Dini or Betty or these people of the past, right? But he doesn't. You can read this in the Intelligenza. So this is, I think, what said that compromise in preparation, which he had to make, Pinkola, let the Italian Mathematical Society demonstrate complete compliance with existing political power. And this led later on that they did protest against racist laws and all these things, you know, they kind of adapted to the regime. Pinkola was dead then, anyway, when the laws came. So, a little bit on the research, I mean, always present topic is, of course, algebraic geometry and Conforto went through here in Göttingen, and he said something in our country, modern algebra has not entered the academic area in the smallest way. This reproduced in Volagio Nastati, stolen, of course, again in the website of St. Andrews without giving the source. I mean, it's a useful website, but they never give really reliable sources. But he's skeptical at the same time against modern algebra in the sense of van der Waal, right? So he thinks the right thing would be kind of to get a deeper connection between algebraic geometry in Italy, right? To combine those. And also the Hasse, right? The theory of numbers. So which is usually not fostered in Italy. So then we have Brokoff again. There was this, as you know, the famous oath, 1931, which the professors had to swear for the government and for Mussolini. And Volterra was the only mathematician who refused to take the oath. Something he was 71. You could argue, but anyway. So then Harvard University drafted a letter to Professor there, and this was then published in Italy Today and signed by many other scientists as well, against this kind of oath swearing thing. Interesting thing is that that the rather conservative Birkhoff kind of didn't want to. He signed this letter actually when they sent it to for publication, this letter in protest, but then it was not published. His signature was not published. So I'm wondering. So you see here, he's signing it. The original letter then was sent to this Italy Today, and then in the print it doesn't appear. I could show you the page, but that's a mystery to me. I cannot rule out a mistake, of course, just but I find it unlikely. So he didn't want to kind of appear so openly on the political scene. Are you looking for names too?
I'm wondering about Eisenhower.
Eisenhower, he's Princeton, right?
Yeah.
And this is
It goes like it's hard, but I think it goes like
yeah, okay. So then they, of course, recognizing the takeover of the Nazis, and they're comparing it again with, this time, Germans with Bolshevism. And then they are much more skeptical about Nazism and in mathematics than before about Mussolini mathematics, because of course the entire something kind of purge immediately in 1933, which came much later in Italy. The techniques of Bolshevism and the costume salute from Italy. Well, this is not perfectly true, but I mean, some kind of, so at least small rewards kind of reacted to this. So then you have, of course, you know about Ludwig Biebermann, who might in some respects be compared to Sereri. So by alleged differences in incompatibilities between German and Jewish mathematics, which was a pretext for discrimination and dismissal, because they could no longer be able to teach in their mind. And then he was allegedly saying there's no mathematics in Göttingen anymore because they were all driven out. But I mean, it's again an anecdote reported by a reader, and you cannot trust her. But anyway, it's a good book. Lively book. So then, who are going to send van der Waal again to Rome in March 1933? So he said it would have quite a different effect if an outstanding man such as Van der Waal could establish the necessary connection on a much broader front between German algebra and Italian algebraic geometry. But this failed. The times were not there anymore. Anyway, Rockefeller changed policies and they didn't focus so much on mathematics anymore. So these highly praising the school in Pisa, Warren Weaver, let's talk about it. He's there now. But especially at the time when Rockefeller had changed their policies, there was no change anymore, no chance anymore to build a similar institute like the institute in Göttingen in Italy. So, you know, Göttingen in Paris, they got mathematical institutes financed by Rockefeller. And this time was over, especially in 1974, with the conditions of disruption. So, when I have this book, and then we have some immigrants who first could not get to Italy, where they were still, although they were Jewish. The one who was not Jewish, actually, is this Peter Tullin, who worked on complex analysis and several variables with Benke. He happened to be in Rome at the time, and but he was a strong Catholic, and he didn't want to return to Nazi Germany. So he found a place then in South America, but not without disadvantages for him on the research front. He couldn't continue his career. And later on, people like Benke said, well, that was easy for them to go out. We had to stay here and survive and fight. That's what Benke said. I mean, this was really kind of insulting for Tullin. Okay, I cannot go. I'm afraid I cannot go so much into Tullin now. As he went on then, because there was a temporary disagreement between Mussolini and Hitler, so the Germans were not allowed to teach anymore. So Saveri was happy that he went on to Ecuador, right, to South America, and did not occupy the post anymore. So, but this is a different thing from the Jewish immigrants to Italy. Wolfgang Vazov. I mean, we have this kind of political joke, Vittorio Dorme, Bentino, Benito, Succhia, Italia, Piange. But these children, you know this probably, or I don't know what the source is. So what he reports, because he calls his children after the three luminaries. So he doesn't see a spontaneous mass hysteria like in Germany. I don't know whether it's true. You might know this better. As I said, I mean, I cannot vouch for everything which is being quoted here, and then have to go deeper into these things. I mean, we have nationalism, of course, in the beginning of the First World War in Germany, and coming out and quite opposite in 1939, when the Germans were kind of had cold feet immediately when the war began. And so then we have this Robert Frucht, who also then went on. Yeah, these people, I have to say, they had to go in 1938 with the racist kind of laws, and then the foreigners had to. Actually, they could stay if they were married to Italians, but then they wouldn't have a job anymore. So yeah, this is actually from the Shapley papers. It's quoted in hopefully soon coming a book by Erika, right? There's a document on Frucht. Shapley was an astronomer in Harvard who kind of organized help for, especially for older immigrants. So now he will lose his Italian citizenship, must leave Italy before March, and almost all countries are closed to him because of his status. And then, yeah, he could have stayed, but as I said. So then we have the Congress of 1936. Hollings and myself, we published recently a book on this Congress in Oslo. Of course, as a new Norwegian now, I feel responsible for Norwegian history of mathematics too. And so actually, it was connected to the Abyssinian War. So there were sanctions against Italy at the time, which started in 1935. But it was not so that the organizers of the Congress in Oslo excluded the Italians. The Italians themselves, the person of Mussolini, they chose to abstain from the Congress. And so he said, also Severi, who was a big figure there, wasn't allowed to take part. And Annalisa Capristo has given us this copy from the National Archives in Italy. Mussolini was at the same time Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, actually, as you know better than I. They opened even that it might be possible still if the situation changes, but they were lifted actually in July 1936 during the Congress, the sanctions. It was to be made for Italian participation. And the German Norwegians, I mean, in view of the sanctions today against Russia, you would always think they might lift them also very soon if economic interests prevail. Right? And so the Norwegians want to sell their stockfish, and they were among the first to lift the sanctions against Italy. But it was too late for the Congress anyway. So there was a kind of tendency to withdraw Italy, Italian mathematics from the international scene. There was a big Volta Congress in 1935 on high speed in aviation. We had to talk soon about planned Congress for 1959, Erika. Then the cooperation on the political field between the Germans and the Italians began close, especially after the Axis had been founded between the two countries. And then they kind of wanted to coordinate their participation in conferences. So they reported about the Congress in the classification of Jews and anti-fascists played a big role. That's in the Italian embassy. And also the Germans. So they want to, Japan have now also entered coalition, and then we want to get to coordinate their efforts. So aside cooperation, there was also jealousy. Both sides. So the Italians, the Germans were afraid that the Italians would take over international kind of representation. Back in I had this. With the lecture tools, Remote has published an article about collaboration. So then Conforto was at the time in Piccone's Institute, and he wanted to kind of communicate their results also to Germany. As I said, I mean, the Piccone Institute together with the Severi Institute was kind of national impact. So this is again, Eppler and others say that the German scientists emulated the Italian partners, not vice versa. So they were impressed by the Italian results and institutionalization. I'm sorry to be a little quick, but maybe we'll read it in publication data. So actually back in 1986, I published on this fascist plans for reordering European science. The German title is this one, right? So that's a translation here. But interesting is to say the wording, the fascist, right, which was our wording in Eastern Germany for the Nazi plans, right, which has of course some justification because there are some similarities in the social demagogy, in the dictatorial order stuff, but there are of course differences with the anti-Semitic policies and stuff. But anyway, I don't regret this taking over the official terminology, especially since the content, I think, still holds of this document which I published there. So they want to take over responsibility for international institutes. So then they are anxiously saying the Nazis, this plan is all the more urgent because Italy already has such a central institute about building a mathematical research institute. But also they are aware of similar efforts on the part of Italy. So they were kind of anxious that they would be preempted by the Italians. So then I planned a meeting of the Deutsche Mathematikervereinigung in October 1942, where they wanted to invite lots of foreigners. It was a kind of crazy international conference. But this did not take place because in a way the Italians organized a parallel thing And then at this point, Austria was bombed Freiburg under attack, so it was cancelled partly because the Italians had their own international conference in November. And Kassel considered this an Italian move against the German Congress of Mathematicians. So they were really jealous here. So then, of course, I would be able to go fully in the immigration thing. We are looking forward to Erika's book. Of course, the numbers are very different. Immigration from Italy, and so we have the two laws here. They're in a way different. The way it's true. It means Jewishness is defined by religion in the voluntary relation, right? It's basically therefore racist because they don't take into consideration any conversion or whatever, whether they were connected to religion anymore. And then we have only 50,000 Jews at the time in Italy, about 0.2%, and very few converts. In Germany, there were higher population, but still very low. I mean, compared to this, what the scapegoat policy, what they kind of proclaimed there. I mean, so alleging that they were kind of dominating society or whatever. So we have these two persons. And I mean, it's a kind of typical Wehrmacht would never again be allowed to teach after World War II. And Saberi was celebrated by a stamp of the Italian service. And I mean, it's just a final market. This is kind of, Rockefeller said it was Teutonic, he was very tall and whatever. Looked kind of similar in a way to the German. Although people was short, so it's just nothing to take seriously. So we have these 6 mathematicians basically. I counted my book 150 or something research mathematicians from Germany who emigrated, right? And this is kind of incomparable, the numbers. And then we have had restricted places to emigrate. The English-speaking countries were not really kind of first, although 2 research mathematicians went there, but it was a clear preponderance for South America because of the cultural and language connections. And they didn't have these kind of connections to Western countries. So Erika allowed me to quote a bit from your book here. So, so I'm through here. Interesting thing, this Italian mission in Sao Paulo. Which was already starting in 1933, and Fantapié, if he's pronounced Fantapié, was there. He seems to have this practice. I mean, he seems to have profited from this by getting a professorship in Rome, which was previously occupied by some Jew, probably, right? And so it was an official policy. Fantapié was not Jewish, and we have a similar thing in Germany, which the policy with vis-à-vis Turkey. There was so they built new institutions there in South America, right, and used Italians for that. And a similar thing is with the Germans being used for. Oh, I don't have time for that. Sorry. Yeah, I should say that in Turkey, I mean, for Mises went to Istanbul, but at the same time, non-Jewish mathematicians also went to Turkey at the time. So, and then actually Turkish people were thrown out at the same time by the Jewish emigres because they want to reorganize their universities. And then even the Jewish immigrants to Turkey would sometimes say that they are acting in the cultural interest of Germany. So I mean, it's a very complicated situation. Okay. I have some comparisons. I think not to compromise all your plans here to come to an ending now. Okay. Well, I think that's a kind of conclusion. I could go further.
Thank you very much. Lecture. And are there any questions or comments?
No? Yeah.
I'm back to the corruption of the US and Germany on one side and Italy on the other. I was struck by what we seem to withdraw here, that the Italians had difficulty being placed in university Germany, Italian immigrants in university Germany in the US, whereas of course many Germans were so placed. You see it inside of Berlin, they were associated with all, possibly rather all non-anti-fascist immigrants. Why is this difference?
I mean, the first thing which I probably didn't mention exactly good enough is the late immigration. I mean, in 1938, almost everything was built. So the same problem occurred also for Austrians and people who came to Czechoslovakia. It was much more difficult for them to get positions, right? And then, of course, there were, of course, fewer numbers, and then Fubini did get a position in the Institute of Advanced Study with Redland, right? So it was not so that they did not get at all a position, and even they were anxious to get Beniamino Serra to the US, but they didn't succeed because well, he was settled anyway in England, so he was attractive also to them because of unemployed German trade. So yeah, I mean, several factors coming together, but we have to realize that even high and high prestigious professors in Europe did have problems to get positions, and often didn't become full professors anymore. Felix Bernstein and genetics and statistics, people who were really suffering also suffering immigrants. Yeah.
In Italian and Germany, national liberal state occupied many Jewish in important position.
In Germany,
In Germany, it's important position. In the first one of the 20th century, Poland was in the army, the German army. Also, Kukowska, also Muslim. And in the Italian army, it was Slovenia or there, but also Elia Levy, a mathematician Jewish. There is also a tradition, national tradition in the community.
the Jewish community.
Yes, no, yes, also you should in the first part of also in Germany. In Germany, you have to remember many aspects, but it's German, William, the German Jewish from William, the king of
Wilhelm II.
yes.
What was Hitler?
Yes, yes. The Jewish had a very important position in this, in the government, in the state.
One of the so-called Kaiser, the kind of coming up at once, 1900, right?
It is not a original question of the the national law. Italy and Germany were not particularly voted to the Jewish legislation.
No, I mean, it's nice to look at nuance that there was always academic anti-Semitism in German universities, certainly much more so than in Italy, as I can say from when, I mean, for promotions of
Similar question. When the fascism, the beginning of the fascists, in Italy, then I have three organizations for documentation. The academic engineering, the mathematical union of mathematical Italiano, and the matrices. All were presented by Jews. Academic engineering of Terra, matrices from the West, and the community mathematical Italiana, even. Is a very integrated.
No, you English also. Germany was a kind of propagandistic thing to use to prepare the Nazi regime by putting the blame on Jews. I mean, many Jews fought in the war also, and then there was actually an exemption in the anti-Semitic law for those who had fought in the war. They were exempted from release from dismissal for two years. But then, I mean, in 1935, it didn't count anymore. It was showed that it was kind of just a propagandistic kind of tool to